Okay, it is 5:30. Welcome, everyone. We are at the Legacy campus in the boardroom. It is the second day of September at 5:30. And we will start with roll call.
Larry Jepson, board member.
Randall Bagley, board member.
Roger Pulsford, board member.
Terry Rhodes, board member.
Kathy Christiansen, board member.
Chris Corcoran, board member.
Jeff Nielsen, board member.
Jared Black, business administrator.
And Steve Norton, superintendent, is excused. Chris Corcoran will lead us in the pledge and mission statement.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our mission is to educate students for success in a changing world.
Thanks, Chris. And next, we'll move on to public input.
I don't believe we have anything, but I'll
And moving on to our action agenda, we have the request for approval of the ARP ESSER 3 plan for Cache County School District.
Hi. We had the opportunity to get together with representatives from many of the schools in the district. We invited someone from every school to attend our stakeholder meeting. Unfortunately, we didn't get someone from every school, but we had a pretty good showing from schools across the valley. And we presented our plan to them, and we feel like we had pretty good support. In fact, they were all very excited about the things that we had included in our plan. And so if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we would request for approval.
Anyone have questions or further instruction that we need from this crew of great people? All right, I will take a motion.
I move that we approve the ESSER 3 plan for the Cache County School District.
I second.
All right, we will vote on the approving the ESSER 3 plan for Cache County School District.
Thank you.
Okay, the voting is closed and the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The ESSER 3 plan for Cache County School District is now approved. You can move forward. Moving on to our reports agenda, we will have a report on upcoming changes to special ed policy and procedures given by Jenny Bust.
I sent you, did you all get the copy of what the state has required? Okay, because I have extra copies if you need it. So I'm here today because I just wanted to, I guess, forewarn you is what I was told, that I need approval for our new policies and procedures manual. So this is our old one. And I submitted our new one to the state. So what has happened is actually last year in August of 2020, the state went through and redid the state policies, rules and regs for special education. So then they came to the directors and they said, okay, now you need to do the same thing for your district. And so that's what we've done. And so I submitted it to the state, and then within the next week and a half, I should get any recommendations or requirements that I need to change back. And then my plan is that on then the September 23rd, I believe, is the date for the next board meeting. I would bring those approved changes from the state to you guys, and then it has to be approved by you guys. And what I was planning on doing, because the second sheet that has the Utah State Board of Education manual changes, not a lot of it changed. A lot of it was the formatting types of things, just change things around. But there were some significant changes to the policy. The first one that it's listed on here is Section X, which is the budget, and how federal funds are spent. We have to make sure that the federal funds we get that are earmarked for special education are spent on special education students. And in the past, not necessarily in our district, but there's been some schools that have struggled with that. So they're just clarifying those. They updated Utah Code and Administrative Rule citations. They just rewrote those. They consolidated some of the consent sections under the parent consent. They updated procedures, and this is the biggest one that you'll see in ours, is that we used to be what was called the combination method to qualify students with disabilities, and now we've changed to the patterns of strength and weaknesses. So the new policies and procedures manual addresses that. It also talks about different terminology for the ASL interpreters and their requirements. It added the definition of co-teaching, because that's a program that is now, it's fully in our district, but it's also moving statewide as well. Also reviewed the use of the word program when we went through it as directors. Program was being used to talk about both program of services plus funding programs, and then clarified the definition of specially designed instruction, as well as move the process for recouping state special ed carry forward funds into state rule instead of special ed rule. So those are the significant changes, and what the plan is when I get that manual back, which is 100 pages, and I'm sure that all of you really want to read that, I will highlight those areas that have changed, those significant changes, as well as give you the old manuals so you can kind of compare those when you're looking through for that approval. So I'll get that to you guys as soon as I get it back. So that really is just what I had today. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Was the definition of co-teaching changed substantially?
No, it was actually just added, because I don't know that there was a definite teaching or a definition of co-teaching. So the definition that is in the new manual for co-teaching is licensed general education teacher and a licensed special education teacher. They plan and provide specially designed instruction to students.
I just have one question, but I think it's not pertaining to this.
Okay.
Do we still have a flow chart for teachers that shows them the process that they go through to report and do the things that they need to for recommending a child for special?
They do, and it has changed over the years, because now we have in the elementaries, we have tag teams, and so it really has changed. But yes, we do have a flow chart that we have gotten out to schools. So myself and Kayleen Wooten, who is my elementary resource coordinator, and Alden, Jack, and Joe Cottrell have gone to probably a handful of schools at this point and presented to the faculty that tiered process. You know, special ed kids are gen ed kids first, and so they should be receiving those tier 1 general ed services unless they can access them. And then we talk about the tier 2 part of it, and if you do have concerns, here's your steps. You know, you come to your tag team, you provide those interventions, and we even give them examples of the difference between accommodations, interventions, and modifications, because it's confusing. There's a lot of stuff, and we also go through the data that they need to take in order to make those referrals too.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I just remember when we didn't have a flow chart.
Yes.
And they came out with a new plan, and it was mind-boggling.
Yes.
But that flow chart helped so much.
Yes.
Because you knew exactly what to do.
Yeah,
and
and we do have that one, and that one we have is one page. It's like, okay, this is what you do, and Alden's done a great job to say, okay, here's your checklist for tier 2, here's what you need to do, and then we look at that tier 3 option.
Thank
So,
you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else have questions for Jenny? Thank you for that work.
You're welcome.
I remember when Joel did the last one, and it was
Yeah, it's
crazy.
That was the first one.
Yeah, back
we
in
had.
2016 was the last time it was changed.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, well, thank you. I'll be back in a couple weeks.
All right, thanks. Okay, moving on to our high school graduation ceremony discussion. Chris?
I had a couple meetings this past week with people on USU's campus, so especially just for the information of the district, especially since Dr. Norton isn't here. They were good meetings. I mean, I took notes when we had a month ago, when we had district principals visiting, and I think the comments boiled down to a few broad areas. So let me just quickly review these, and then I'll tell you what response I got from the university. Total cost was an issue. What's $5,000 per school going toward? The itemized billing issue. There were a bunch of things on the itemized bill that were kind of confusing. And it wasn't apparent exactly what the direct benefit was. Parking. I think you mentioned that. Which I was kind of surprised by, because knowing Utah State's campus, all parking should be free, at that time of year at the end of May, because everybody's gone. And then, on a more personal level, the ability of schools to kind of personalize the ceremony, which, it's a little more, it's a little less personalized in the spectrum, or at least it has been. The fact that the ceremony is rushed because we're stacking ceremonies together, so people feel like they're being shoved out of the spectrum, and then just kind of treating high schools as partners. So I met with a couple of people. One is the guy who's the coordinator for all events at Utah State, and he's actually a good friend of mine. And so I had a really nice discussion with him, and he was very appreciative of the feedback, actually, because I think he used to just be in charge of the spectrum, but now he's over all events at Utah State, and so this is very interesting to him, and he was glad that we were giving them this feedback. And I also talked to somebody who's a vice president. It's Robert Wagner, but his purview is also over things like admissions and recruitment and PR. I felt like they would have a vested interest in making ceremonies more interesting if we were going to continue with the spectrum, because as we've talked about, we want graduations to also be aspirational. So it's not a bad thing when we have a major university here in the Valley to use that as a way of directing students toward something greater, college or beyond. So like I said, really good meetings. I won't spend a lot of time going into detail, but I will tell you that all of these issues they feel are totally addressable. And I talked through some possibilities with them. Cost is negotiable, for one thing. I asked them if they were willing to consider sponsors, to defray the cost. Absolutely. They'd be happy to talk about that. They have, of course, they have a beautiful jumbotron in that space, and so it would be possible to have a sponsor, with the sponsor name there in a way that would make it, something that would be really agreeable to somebody willing to pitch in a few $1,000s to defray the cost. Having said that as well, I mean, they're willing to think about lowering the cost. I talked to them about Shane Jones' point that, sometimes local high schools have been good citizens and sharing their own facilities for free. Would they consider maybe lowering the cost, given that we want to maintain that kind of relationship? They're totally good with that, and he is, completely willing to look at their itemized bill. I think that the itemized bill is a way for them to be transparent. So, that's to their credit, but he agrees that there are things on that bill that may not seem like they're directly,
applicable.
Directly used, I guess I should say. Now, in terms of the personalizing the ceremony, I talked through with him and with Robert Wagner a lot of ideas, because there is a lot of space to do creative things that would make the ceremony unique to high schools. Like we talked about, just small things like having Big Blue there, in the jersey of the high school, just doing some things like that. I mean, there wouldn't be any one thing, but there are lots of things that they could do, little things, using the Jumbotron to show pictures of students, to actually incorporate social media feeds on the Jumbotron so the kids could be posting and they could be seeing things while they're there. And they are certainly willing. I mean, I know Steve in the last meeting acknowledged, or a month ago, he acknowledged that the stacking of the ceremonies was basically the district's doing, not the spectrum. They're fine at USU spreading ceremonies out over a few days. I think it was a matter of convenience for the district. The district personnel who have to be at all ceremonies could just blow the whole thing out in 1 or 2 days instead of having it over a few days. But they're happy to have, say 2 per day, or something along those lines, so that people feel like parents can take their kids down to the Spectrum 4, they can take pictures, they don't feel like they're just being bum rushed, at the end of the ceremony. I guess my feeling is that, we can discuss this, and certainly if you guys have any questions, I welcome that. But, my feeling is based on the discussion that we had last month, there were legitimate concerns about, for example, the cost of the ceremonies, being similar or more if people try to host them at their own schools. Limitations on the number of people who can attend if they're hosted, at the school. And third, the weather and the vicissitudes of the weather. My feeling is, as a board, and I can certainly facilitate this because I know all these people and I can bring us together with representatives from the district. I would just like to propose that we continue with the Spectrum, but that we negotiate the cost, we seek sponsors, and we work with creative teams combining Utah State with people from the district to use. There are a lot of resources in the Spectrum. There are a lot of particularly the Jumbotron and so on, the sound system, to use what they have in more creative ways than maybe we have in the past, to just fund the graduations up a little bit and to personalize them for the high schools. And I think, talking to them, they're actually very excited about this. In fact, Reed Kapner, who's the events coordinator, said to me, I love this discussion, because he said, I've been thinking about this as well, but we're glad to have somebody, we're glad to have people from the district who care so that we can actually explore what we can do. It may be, I don't want to proliferate committees, obviously, but it may be a matter of having, setting the dates so that we actually have it on the calendar with the Spectrum, and then having me work on behalf of the school board to get a committee of a few people from the university and a few people from our high schools.
Maybe even students.
Yeah, and students, yeah, that's a good point, especially students. To just think of ways of doing it in the Spectrum in a way that makes it fun, more cost-effective, and that gives us a venue that's maybe reliable, especially weather-wise, and one that can fit a lot more people. So that's kind of what I've found out over the past couple of weeks, and I'm open to questions or discussions about it.
Well, I like the committee idea. I think that would be good to get that group of people together and see what the art of the possible is. I'm with you on that.
Would the cost be less if, say, for example, the education department sponsored us on campus? I mean, and all they have to do is just say, we sponsor you.
The College of Education?
Uh-huh.
Sure. I mean, there could be on-campus sponsors, absolutely. But, we have connections on the board, and the district has connections. I don't think, because you think about the cost of $20,000 for 4 graduations. I mean, we're running an analytics center up on campus in my department that we've just started over the past 2 years, and we get these kinds of sponsorships all the time from corporations. I mean, for them, often, a few $1,000s is couch cushion change, whereas for us and our schools, of course, that's very significant. I don't think it would be that hard for us to get, some key sponsors for this kind of event, and certainly some of those could be on campus. In fact, if they were agreeable to reducing the cost as partners, then that might open the door to kind of in-kind sponsorships. I also talked to them, for example, I think that Terry, Principal Cutler, brought up, the fact that the ushers, were kind of few and far between and kind of disinterested. We talked about using the USU ambassadors, students, especially students who are ambassadors from the Valley, to work. I mean, they were really excited about all these ideas. I just threw some things out there to say, is there a way that we can tie this into students and get them excited because they can see that, the biggest educational institution in the area cares about them and cares about these high schools. I think it could be, a real watershed, in how we, how we conduct our graduations, just coming out of COVID, to add in some of the fun elements that have been added as people have been kind of trying to jerry-rig graduations during COVID, but kind of take it into the future. Make it a little less dry, a little more fun, and use the venue to our advantage. Fewer speeches from school board members, things like that.
Mike, when do the principals have to make that decision about, or when do they need to know?
Well, usually by now, they would have had a meeting and scheduled.
Right.
But probably nobody has done that. Usually our competition is Logan and Box Elder. So the principals called me this week and says, have any decisions been made? And I said, no, the board would probably make that decision tonight. So we would immediately get together and start scheduling with Utah State a date, for the graduations. And sounds to me like what Chris has been able to find out. There's some real opportunities to make some positive improvements on that. So
But it would have to be done fairly soon, right?
Yes, really quick.
He didn't, Reed indicated that right now, the schedule around that time is pretty open, and Box Elder hasn't reserved anything yet with the Spectrum. Has not.
Because, everybody's a little leery,
Anything
because
about
you don't know what's going to happen with COVID in the spring. But I guess we could schedule, and then they could always fall back to their school But the university would have to make that decision early enough to where the schools could, go to an alternate plan with it.
So would we have to pass that saying, yes, we would like them to schedule, or would they just do that, and then as we get closer?
If the board decides tonight that you would like to, try USU again under some new circumstances, then they go. They make the scheduling. They make the appointments.
And like I said, I would be happy to represent the board, to pull some students and staff together and arrange those kinds of meetings with the right people on campus, so we can, once we actually get it scheduled, we can get the ball rolling quickly and start planning out what we're going to do.
Yeah. Is it next week, Tim, we have the high school principals? I think if you could jump into that meeting and just share with them tonight what you've been able to share here, I think that would help a lot, the principals.
What do you and Tim think, Mike?
Well, based on what I'm hearing tonight, it does solve some of the big concerns that we have. And I'm willing to try USU myself again, because it does solve those three big factors. But you heard what the principals said. They like what they said, what they like, but they didn't say they would not support going back to the Spectrum. All of them said that they would do that if that's what the board, because it is a big job to sponsor that at your school.
Yeah.
So when is the principals meeting next week?
It's on the 14th.
The 14th?
Yeah.
Okay.
What are your thoughts, Tim?
I think I like everything that was presented, because I think it addresses all of the issues the principals had. I think the trick is going to be coming back to the patrons with those plans, so to speak, because they polled all of the patrons on what they would prefer. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them wanted some more flexibility, but it sounds like we could have that kind of flexibility at the Spectrum. And I agree with Chris, it could be positive in a lot of ways, because we do have to keep in mind weather and and making sure everybody has access to graduation, and the Spectrum's definitely a better place to accomplish that. And so if we can meld in what happened out at the schools by doing some things at the Spectrum, I think that's a win-win on both sides.
Yeah, and we could maybe accomplish that by having parents and students as part of that committee to, then they got some skin in the game and how that program would go.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I would point out that, yeah, they did survey parents, but, I guess Principal Snow, I mean, Tim, I'm a stat geek. His survey had a response level of 157. In fact, I just in my class today, I lectured about non-representative samples. That was the topic of my class today. And so I'm a little bit wary of reading too much into, a poll where it was self-selected, and because usually with the self-selected poll, the people who have the strongest feelings about something are going to respond. I think if we did, my feeling is if we did this the right way, I think we could bring people along. And Jeff, that's a great idea to maybe include some parents, like some members of the community councils from across the high schools as well. I think if we just got everybody there and got everybody's creative juices going, that we could come up with some, really cool stuff that would maybe shorten the ceremony a little bit, add in some bursts of energy, and make it very personal for each high school.
Our next meeting is 3 weeks away. So is everyone ready to make this decision tonight?
Yeah.
Hey, Larry, weigh in.
I think this has real merit. I think we need to pursue it.
Randall?
Yeah, I think a lot of issues have been addressed, the costs. I think if we can negotiate the fee down a little lower, I think Chris did a good job of, addressing some issues, so I'd be okay with it.
Okay, Roger?
I agree. And the principals said they would do whatever we ask them to do, so I'm with you, issue.
Well, I'm happy with either way. I feel like we lose the small town feel of it by not having it at the high schools, by having it at the university, and you can't get that at the university. But I understand why you want it there, and for the greater vision that it provides by having it there. So I'm fine either way.
My feeling is weather isn't just if it rains, but how hot it is outside too, to have it, which could sometimes be a problem. And I can't remember what my other thought was here on it. But I like the idea. But I like the idea of the university working with us as partners instead of coming across as this is our facilities and you do it this way.
Jeff?
I've already played my card, so.
All right, so it sounds like we'll just move forward with moving toward the university, and you can start working on that committee, and if you'll visit the principals, is it secondary principals next week? Okay.
It's the 14th, what time?
Well, it's a little different. We have general principals starting at 9, and when that finishes up, we roll right into secondary and elementary. So if you can be a little fluid, it'll probably happen about 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Chris, for all your homework.
And we can bring you in remotely to save you having to be in person.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
So we want Mike to let the principals know tomorrow they can go ahead and start scheduling, right?
Right.
Tell me again, who's the contact that you've been talking to schedule?
Well, I'll give you his cell number after this meeting if you want, and then that way you can just, and I'll give him a heads up that you're going to contact him directly, and that way you can start looking at dates.
Okay. Any other discussion on this that needs to be?
Oh, I know what my other point was. If we do have it at the university, and they each have a specific time, we would be able to attend all of them, unlike the last couple of years where we couldn't really go to all of them because they were so scattered. So that's a plus in my opinion.
I went to all of them this year.
Yeah, well, you're a superwoman. Congratulations.
I'm just saying it's possible.
Yes, okay. I agree.
Okay, moving on to discussing policy on naming buildings by Mike, because Gary's not here.
I attached on the agenda item the two policies that are currently in the district policy book that reference facilities and how things are named. And the first one I'm just going to review quick, and I'm going to go over this really quick, it's in section 6,000, facility development and maintenance. And it's titled Naming of Facilities. And under the first paragraph there that it's talking about, well, it's the last sentence in the first paragraph. It says the Board of Education, it's the policy of the Board of Education that school buildings will not be named after cities or towns within the Cache County. And then it goes through approval process. And we went through this just recently with our new high schools, also with Mountainside, Birch Creek, and Heritage. As those schools came in and they had a committee and they went through that process with you. And all I'm doing right now is just giving you a little bit of history. So that's how we named those new schools. And then we've had some employees who have passed away. Some examples of that, Bill Lindauer was the principal at Providence Elementary. And also we had a couple of teachers, one at Mountain Crest, one at Cedar Ridge, and there's probably more teachers that have passed away. And what has happened with those folks, with Bill Lindauer, and in most all the cases with all of these, the family has stepped up and wanted to do something. And Bill Lindauer, they've sponsored a yearly type of a scholarship, and there's a picture of Bill down at the district office, and the plaque grows every year on who's received that type of scholarship. And also with the two teachers that passed away, I know the one teacher's pictures at Cedar Ridge just as a remembrance. And I am not sure at Mountain Crest, but I think that family sponsors, he was a science teacher there, sponsors a little scholarship every year. And I would be very willing to visit with Lori Rindlisbacher. I know her very well, to see if she would be interested in doing something, in remembrance with Kelly on that. And then the other policy talks about named gifts to Cache County School District. And it talks about different levels of money that are donated by businesses or whatever and if the district chose to name a facility based on the amount of money that was donated. And I am only aware of one case where that's happened. And that's out at Mountain Crest in the football stadium. The announcer's booth is labeled Miller's up there because Miller's put a lot of money into that announcer's booth. That is the only case.
There's one more, Mike. There's the Skyview
football
track and field was by the Hansons.
The Hansons, yeah, with the amount of kids. So that's another example on that. So I guess that's the history of what the current policies say. And when we've had a chance to talk at the district, everybody knows Kelly really well, and we all love Kelly. But I would suggest we follow something similar to what happened with Bill Lindauer, with what the families proposed. And like I say, I'd be very willing to go talk to Lori to see if she had any interest in anything. And even if she didn't, that doesn't mean as a district we wouldn't want to put a plaque or something in his school. Just to remember Kelly, on that. But we've had a lot of different teachers and then pass away that we haven't done anything extra special with, like on that. So that's the report from where we're at the district. So if the board would want me to consider changing anything in a policy that we currently have, I'd like to hear your feedback on that, or where you want to go from here with it.
My opinion is no, because Kelly, for example, he was principal at Lincoln, not Lincoln, at Canyon, Wellsville, and Nibley, right?
Spring Creek.
Yeah, it's Spring Creek.
And Spring Creek.
Nibley.
Yeah. So multiple schools,
Yeah.
then you're putting a plaque in each building, but if you have some kind of remembrance thing, then it's not one school in particular.
Yeah, and maybe that could be at the district office, like where Bill's
Right.
little plaque is and stuff. It's in the main entryway there on one of the hallways there. But I'm all for acknowledging people, and sometimes these things happen and unexpected, and you do what you can to remember them on it.
I think these are appropriate. I don't see any reason to change.
Yeah, the policies, I agree that these policies are sufficient for what we need. I can't see any reason to change them at this point. Anyone else want to weigh in on policy? So how would we like Mike to proceed?
Because I did offer a couple of things. I can go talk to Lori, just see what she's thinking right now. And I could have Gary go with me on that. And have this.
I think that's probably the best action at this point, just to see, because like you said, the ones that have been recognized thus far were instigated by the families.
Yeah.
And so if she's interested in it, then we could help her do something, but if it doesn't matter to her, or then there's no reason for us to move ahead with it.
And I feel like we shouldn't start a habit of naming rooms or gyms or whatever after people who have passed away, because over the years there's going to be more, and just seems like it might become out of control.
Okay. I know, Randall, you're the one who wanted, get a little more information on this. Is this enough information for you?
Yeah, as long as I think as he's recognized, and, it could be different ways. I don't know if we necessarily need to name an auditorium or building, but, it would be nice if, maybe talk to Lori, see what she says.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
take it from there, so.
Yeah, we all miss Kelly, that's for sure. Okay.
All right, thanks for that homework, Mike. Moving on, board member reports. Kathy, you're up on Smithfield Rec Center.
Okay, so Jared, jump in here if I miss anything. A couple of times a year, we meet with the rec center board, and we had a meeting on August 23rd, and we did go over the budget, and all is well with the budget. We have a good amount of cash for in case of emergencies. And just as a reminder, we do share the rec center at the high school with Smithfield. We have 65% interest, and Smithfield City has 35% interest in it. And the contributions come in according to that. There was some discussion, which also happened a little bit at our last meeting, that there is an increased demand on the facility by the school, and for a few reasons. First of all, they now have freshman teams excuse me, who are there at the school, and so that has increased the demand by 25% of the facilities. They have several club teams that have been added, and that it includes girls wrestling, boys and girls lacrosse, and then boys volleyball has also started, but has not yet been sanctioned by the UHSAA. So the third thing that has happened is that they used to have the freshman games that use the gyms start at 5. Now, or wait a minute, start at 3:30, right? And now, because of the regional schedule, they start at 5. So all of these things have caused more use of the rec center and the facilities by the schools. And so the patrons who are from Smithfield, who pay a membership, don't have as much opportunity to go in and use it. And so the discussion was, would the school district want to buy out the Smithfield City? Would somewhere down the road, when a middle school is built, we add another rec center to it? Or should we add a couple of rooms? And in checking with them, they thought that a weight room and a multi-purpose room would probably cover the extra time in the facilities that they needed for the Smithfield people. But in talking with Steve, he is going to set up a meeting with Brett Daniels, who is the director, and see how we could maybe work this out so that it still functions as a combined entity for both Smithfield and for us, because there probably would be additional concerns if we put more money into Skyview and then the other high schools didn't have any facilities like it. So that's kind of where it is right now, is that according to Steve, he would like to try and see if we can work it out with Principal Monson and with Brett Daniels so that we are still working together. It's worked for 21 years, and Jared did comment that he and his son have memberships there, and they've gone in the evening, and there's been ample space for other people in the community to come in and participate. So I think it just is going to end up that we have a discussion further about this.
So Kathy, can we go back just a sec? I got lost on if we built another weight room and multi-purpose room, that's the feeling, would there be ample capacity at that point? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and so there's one little point there that I forgot.
Okay.
So it was suggested that the Smithfield city manager find someone to do a study and see how much that would cost to have that added. And so we voted to go forward with that as long as the study wasn't so expensive that we really couldn't afford it.
So the idea would be that we would contribute proportionally to creating that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So any other questions or input that you have on this?
I've had the same discussion with the mayor, and that's the concern I got was that the increased usage was creating challenges.
So there's probably capacity, but it's just at the critical times of the day, right? That's what I'm looking at.
Right. Mike?
Yeah, I think I'd just share the same thing that's been, the minute you do something there, the other 3 high schools are going to say now,
right?
You know, and we've had an opportunity to talk to other communities about rec center type things, and there really hasn't been that much interest at other sites. Well, there is some going on at Green Canyon, a little bit of that, but nothing on the south end, and so, but I know exactly where it will go when it happens.
Are you going to be at that meeting with Brett Daniels when that occurs, or don't you know?
We can talk to the soup and make sure we are.
Okay. Because I felt like Brett is under a lot of pressure trying to make this work for everyone. And it seemed like some of the Smithfield citizens were not happy that they weren't getting time, but then some of the coaches also were putting pressure on him because they wanted more time for their teams. And so I just think people who have a good history and background probably should be at that meeting when Steve does meet with Brett. So anybody else have any other comments that I can pass
Kathy,
along?
one more thing is, so is there a priority preference that happens in the scheduling?
During the school hours, the school has preference.
Okay.
So the citizens of Smithfield go early in the morning, and they start at 5:30, and then they can go in the evening up until 10. That's when it closes. And so because the freshman games have been moved to 5, that really does create more pressure or less opportunity for the Smithfield citizens to come in and use those gyms if they want to.
Was that in a contract previously and the times outlined, or has that just been kind of a gentleman's agreement the whole time?
I'm not sure. They just changed the bylaws last year. I'll have to go back and look at them and see, but
I just didn't know if we were encroaching on space or they were encroaching on space or what the...
There is I was 8 years at Skyview, and there is a contractual agreement. And I do agree with Kathy completely, is that we have added freshmen there since that contract. We have added lacrosse, but there's always been, I think, a really good relationship between the school, and there's always been those pressures, the relationship between the school and the rec center, and the pressure that happens as two groups with different interests are competing for that space. It actually says in the contract that they, at least it used to, that they wouldn't come in during school time, but I can tell you it works both ways. We have patrons in there using the weight room during the days when we don't have weightlifting class, and using the racquetball courts and walking on the track, and so I think the superintendent is correct, that's always it's nice to sit down and talk through some of those issues, and we've always been able to reach a consensus that works out for both groups.
Because both sides are probably in violation, right, of the original contract?
Yeah, but it's just flexible back and forth, and they've been good to work with, but there is a tension that's always there when you're trying to share facilities.
Sure.
I think the Smithfield citizens also can come in during rock hour and use it, but then the problem with that is rock hour is short, and so the class starts for weightlifting, and the people are still there, and they're doing their workouts, and they don't want to quit. So probably more information in the contract needs to be redefined or fixed.
Who's the policeman in there? I'm just curious.
Who's the policeman?
Yeah, as far as keeping people honest.
Brett is fantastic.
He is fantastic.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, he's very good to work with, and police, you really don't, he brings up concerns when he has them with students in there or mistreating the equipment, and he also watches after his patrons. It's not a perfect system, but he's very good at communicating with us.
Okay.
And we helped out there with a custodian this year, realizing that there needed to be more shared burden on the school's part to help with the facilities down there, because that adds an extra load to the custodians. So.
Sure.
And I think they put some signage in the weight room so that the Smithfield people know what the times are. But I've never been in there, so I don't know. That was one of the things that he said he would add. But he is fantastic. And I kind of felt like this is the first time in all of the 8 years I've been going to those meetings that he exhibited a bit of stress about it. So
Sounds like the sit-down's really the solution here. Get everybody together and
too.
work it out.
So anything else anybody wants to add, and I'll pass it along before the sit-down meeting. Okay, thanks. Did I miss anything, Jared?
It's a great summary.
Okay.
All right, moving on. Thanks for that, Kathy. Good luck with that meeting. Moving on to the president report. Agenda would like to take a new board picture. So we have Jared in the picture because the one online does not have Jared. So will all of you be here at the next meeting?
I will not.
Okay.
There's a chance I might not be there either.
Will all of you be here the first week in October?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay.
That'll give me time to build a little platform for the board members, and then Jared can just stand on the floor there.
Yeah, I know the superintendent wants to stand next for that. So, yeah.
All right, I'll arrange that with Jenda for the first meeting in October. Also, there's some, because there's still, I don't know what word to put on it. They're still negotiating House Bill 428, which was presented at this last legislative session at the state. And it's called Public Education Governance and Appeals. In a nutshell, this is the one that the legislature would give the state board power to remove all members of a local school board if enough patrons didn't like the decisions they were making. And part of the argument of the bill's sponsor is that local school board members don't get any training for their positions, so they don't know what they're doing. And so that's my preface to say, please go online and do your open meeting law and school finance trainings, because it has become certainly more important for us to show that we are doing our professional development constantly. It's a really, and I thought we were done with HB 428, but apparently it continues. Discussion on it has continued, and USBA leadership is still meeting with the sponsor to try and help him understand that school board members do put in a lot of time for professional development and do study on their own and those types of things for the positions that we hold.
Yeah, but I mean, if they didn't like our decisions, they'd vote us out, right? Or I don't understand why they think that they would have control to do that. Is there more to it?
Well, it would be, it all comes down to Salt Lake School District last year.
Okay.
That was the impetus for this whole piece of legislation.
Got it.
And I thought it would have been dropped completely after it didn't even get close to passing in the legislative session, but apparently he's still considering it bringing back in the next session. So anyway, let's do our training. And the superintendent is not here to give us a report, so we have arrived at the...
I have one item to share with you. Just every fall, we need to do the School Land Trust Community Council training. And we've set the date on that for October 6th in the evening at 6 o'clock. Last year, we did it online meeting, and we received a lot of comments that they really liked that. People didn't have to travel to do it. But this is a meeting really sponsored by the school board, so I need to know, do you want it in person? Is online okay? And in the past, I've put a lot of the training together and presented it. Does the board want to do any of that? I would be involving Tim this year on the training, and we do the training together on it. So I kind of need to know how the board would like to do it, but we do need to get it scheduled and completed.
I think you do a great job.
This is October 6th at 6?
Yep.
I agree. You do awesome. I think you should do it again. Use Tim to help you. I like the idea of the online, if that makes it more convenient for the principals and parents.
Did we have a good turnout, I guess you could call it, with the online last year?
Yeah, we did.
Number-wise?
We really did. We kind of asked our principals what they thought, and most of our principals said online would be a great way to do it, but a couple said, well, maybe in person would be nice to do too. That's why I'm asking the board if you really have a preference, because I think the online worked just fine.
I like the online idea.
Especially with the COVID still going on, I think it's wise to have as many things where we're where we have spacing.
So you okay then?
Yeah, I'm good with online.
I just have one more calendar item is, I don't know if Carolyn has written any of you, the annual legislative luncheon. She reached out to legislators and the best date they had was October 21st at around the noon hour. I don't think from discussions with Carolyn she's reached out to you yet. Do you, any of you see any major problem? Oh, she has. There, she got it. Okay, wonderful.
Jared reached out to us for her.
Well, Jared's on the ball tonight, so.
It's what we pay him for. Anyone else have something they want to address the board on?
Can I just ask a very quick question? You know, we all know, you know, about the tragedy, you know, today at Green Canyon. And I was talking to my son who plays football, and I just was wondering if I could get a quick answer about this from you guys. Apparently, you know, and it's clear why you don't want to do anything that will bring undue attention to this event at the school by, you know, having a really dramatic remembrance because of the risk of, you know, kind of, I don't know, overemphasizing this in a way that might actually influence other students who are experiencing the same issues. My son was telling me that Logan High is actually putting the number of this young man on their helmets, but that they weren't allowed to because of these similar rules. And so I'm wondering if there's any insight that you guys have based on your experience about these rules. Are they local to high schools, or is this based on a district rule?
I wouldn't say it's a rule. It's more of a practice. A few years ago, we met with some specialists from the state and Provo School District who was leading out on this, and it's just that recommendation on the sensitivity. There's a lot of research that you can get repeat incidences around a suicide if you memorialize too much, draw too much attention to. I wasn't aware of, we talked about it. Mike called me at 5:30 this morning, and I was asked me to run over to the school first thing. I was there at 6:30, and we talked about those kinds of things. The coach met with the football team first thing in the morning, talked about, in fact, we brought up that some players might want to, you know, put something on their uniform, and we weren't going to step in and stop that if they wanted to remember their friend that way, but they were probably not going to encourage anything from the school's perspective, but definitely if it was student generated, they wouldn't stand in the way necessarily. But I don't know how that played out throughout the day after I left, but I know Dave was very sensitive to that, and in fact brought up on many occasions the same sentiment that you just did, which is we just want to walk through this carefully and treat the whole situation with the proper level of respect. And
sure. And by the way, thanks for everything that you guys did today at Green Canyon. I mean, that's just a horrible, incomprehensible thing to deal with. But
yeah. It's amazing the support teams, because when I was at the high school, we didn't have nearly the support teams. We had Project Aware staff there, counselors from other schools helping out this morning. A team met in the conference room there first thing this morning, and just a lot of support on behalf of that school, and that was really good to see.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you all for coming. We have reached the end of our